the Elsa Kurt Show with Clay Novak. Serving up trending news and conservative views. Brought to you by the Elsa Kurt Collection. And Refuge Medical. And now, it's time for the show.
Well, hey there. It's another week, another party in the headlines. How are you?
I'm good. You and I took a little bit of a beating this week, in the social media world, but that's okay. We'll talk about that. That's one of our, that's probably our first and biggest topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Talk about former President Biden and the cancer diagnosis. But we got a bunch to talk about. So you're good?
I'm good. I am good. Good to go.
Okay. Well, let's get started then.
Tonight, Biden's cancer bombshell, CBS News in flames, and Bernie finally admits the Democrats are the real threat to democracy. We've got a Mexican warship crashing into the Brooklyn Bridge, a prison break that looks like a Netflix series, and a 4-star admiral headed to prison. Oh, and how about those peace talks? Let's dive in.
Woo, so much to talk about. Before we started, Clay was absolutely right. He said just our first topic alone, we could probably talk the entire hour about, right? I mean, this one is so many layers to this, right? So many layers of thoughts on this. Clay, go ahead. Tell them how we got beat up.
Yeah. So, I'll talk about how I got beat up first, and then we'll talk about you. So, Elsa, for those of you that don't follow us on social media, you should. Elsa posted something about the diagnosis from former President Biden on his prostate cancer. And there were some people chiming in, and I chimed in and I said, I called it that essentially that he wouldn't last more than a year after the election before he passed away. And that was a prediction I had made, I think probably in around the time that he backed out of the race and handed it over to Vice President Harris. But I knew his health was bad. A lot of us knew his health was bad, but I made the prediction that he wouldn't have made it a year. And I got beat up for being a heartless, horrible human being somehow because I predicted, I wasn't celebrating the fact that he's passing away, folks. All I said was I called it because I think most of us knew, well, most of us rational people knew. And then, of course, you, Elsa, really tried to just bring light to the topic and got told that you hadn't done your research, which I thought was interesting. So then she posted a great, listen, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. 99% of us are not doctors. And posted a pretty simple explanation in a cartoon format of what's going on with the president's diagnosis. And then got told again that she had oversimplified and it wasn't detailed enough. Like she's, some medical journal responsibility level kind of stuff. So then you brought the receipts, man. Holy cow. You must have cleaned out Wikipedia and every other source you could find to tell people exactly what was going on.
So here's a, I don't know, maybe a funny quirk of mine. Like you can say a lot of things to me. I have an extremely thick skin. You cannot hurt my feelings. And you can maybe get me a little angry, but not when you come at me personally, generally. But there's one thing I take tremendous pride and enjoyment in, which is research. I am obsessed with learning things. And because I am on social media and I put myself out there on a daily basis, there's one thing I hate more than anything, and that is to be wrong. I don't like being wrong. So in order to avoid being wrong, I will do all of the research. I will spend all day. It's the ADHD thing, hyperfocus. I will spend all day researching something so that I am backed loaded. And when I don't have 100% of the answers, I clarify and I make sure that I make a point of saying that. You know what I mean? So I cover all of my bases. So when someone comes in shooting from the hip and they're like, you didn't do your research. Well, I'm going to take my errands off and we're going to fight, now it's on. So yes, that I was definitely, to use a left word, I was triggered, very triggered by that. So like Clay said, I brought the receipts and explained exactly how I got this information. And, the only validation that I needed from what I posted came from oncology nurses, retired oncologists, people who have had prostate cancer. And every single one of those people said, spot on. This is exactly Correct. So Joe Schmo sitting in his basement in his underwear in mommy's basement telling me that I didn't do my research, he can kind of shove it, And then of course, like you said, I did this, the quick condensed version to back up what I was saying. Like, this is where I got it. Here it is. And I know, and I'm not making fun of anybody. I know my own attention span. I know our attention spans for things is short. So I try and make this very quick. It was probably under 30 seconds, 40 seconds or so video. And their slides, basically infographic slides that give the bare bones of, this whole timeline, blah, 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 all that stuff. And of course, like you said, that's where the, you oversimplified this. Well, yeah, I did. Thank you for treating me as your medical professional. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you the breakdown here in case anyone doesn't know. Former President Biden, he's 82. He's been diagnosed with aggressive late stage prostate cancer that has metastasized to his bones. So here's what we know or need to know, I guess, basically about the prostate cancer that has spread to the bones, that it's not curable, it's only treatable. So that is where he's at right now. And why this matters is because this is an early stage. It likely developed years ago. And the timing of the disclosure, which is post-presidency, obviously, has raised a lot of red flags for a lot of people, including yours truly. And I'm going to speak for you, Clay, as well. So there's a lot of questions here. And to answer the question that you keep hearing, or at least I keep hearing from the left, is what does it matter anymore? Let that poor man be. He's sick. He's dying, basically. Leave him alone. It doesn't matter anymore because he's not the president. Oh, heck yeah, it matters. It matters a whole lot because that opens up all of these questions, right, Clay? Who used the auto pen? We've been asking that question now for a while. Is anything that he did, let me just sum it up, is anything that he did in his presidency, particularly the last years, is it valid? Who was really making these decisions? It's widely admitted now that he was so infirm, he was so not with it, that he was basically incapable of doing anything. So, that's the biggest thing, right?
And so again, you said timing. And so, the timing of this in relation to the release of her recordings, which if you heard those are jarring, right? Mm-hmm. You've got recordings of President Biden not remembering that his son, Beau, had died. Right. You've got him not remembering years, not remembering years, important years of election years and things like that. They're very confused, right? So you've got that. That's evidence to his mental acuity or lack thereof while he was in office. You've also got so that just happened. Then you've got now the Jake Tapper book coming out, right? Mm-hmm. Original Sin, which is about the cover-up of the decline of President Biden that Jake Tapper was a part of, all right? Yeah. As a member of the media, he is complicit in this. It aims a lot at the media, but it also aims at the White House, the staffers, Jill Biden, among others. His horrific son, and everybody included. Now, Tapper by himself has taken all kinds of crap from everybody about this.
Yeah, your girl Megan gave him a good what for?
Yeah, Jon Stewart went after him. There's a whole lot of, it's like, this is a guy from the media telling you that the media didn't give you the news they were supposed to give you a year after they gave it to you or didn't give it to you that he should have done himself. This is so convoluted. It's not even funny. It's a massive hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. So you've got those two things, but you've also got the Democrat, the DNC, the party as a whole. They want President Biden to go away. Yes. Every time he appears in public, every time he says something publicly, it is a problem that they have to deal with. Right. Mm-hmm. So you've got all of this. And then the timing in relation to the last election. Okay. Yeah. I have said this before. I've said this a number of times. Had he gotten elected, he would have immediately resigned and handed the reins off to Vice President Harris. Right. That to me, that was the plan. Yes. Then he could give her 3.5 years as president, right? Non-elected, and then have her run again and again, potentially for 15.5 years in office, twice elected, once appointed. And I think that was part of the plan. Mm-hmm. I actually thought that was going to happen early in his first term, or early in the first term, not into the second term, but regardless, the plan stayed the same. I would tell you including me, when this first came out, I questioned if it was even a real diagnosis.
Interesting. Yes, I've heard that actually. I've heard people say that as well.
And I had people ask me, well, what does he gain out of a fake cancer diagnosis? The same thing he gains out of a real cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, distraction.
Sympathy.
Yeah,
right?
sympathy,
He's
distraction. Right.
Immediately sequestered from the media. Never has to answer a question again, ever.
Right.
Never again. Never appears in public. Never appears in the media. Never has to answer for what's in Tapper's book. The Democrats are already saying don't hold him accountable for anything. He can't be questioned. A cancer diagnosis. It has a lot more, I think, honorable, a lot more sympathy, empathy than a dementia diagnosis.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what everybody assumes.
Yes.
So,
yes.
People, it's that old, she's got cancer.
Right.
You whisper it. Nobody wants to say it out loud.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be gained out of this diagnosis, real or fake. And so, yeah, it's, but the certainty in all of it is, if it is a real diagnosis, this is not new news.
No, it's entirely not. And, as always, Clay, I'm so stunned and amazed at the, liberal leftist minions, the everyday people who are still, even with everything being dropped in their lap from their own people, Jake Tapper, from their own people, saying, yeah, we lied. Whoops, my bad. They're still making excuses, justifications, trying to shame anyone who dares to say, hang on a second here. Something's kind of funny, and they try to use their shame tactics, which are not working. By the way, left, that's done. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your feelings, your pearl clutching, your gasping, none of it. Don't care. And because normal people with fully functioning brains, know that you can actually feel compassion for someone and feel bad for what they're going through and still expect accountability and consequences for bad, illegal, wrong behavior and actions. It is as simple as that. You're not getting a pass because guess what? That woman, and I'm sorry that I don't know her name, the elderly woman, or not elderly, older woman who had cancer, the J6er, he didn't give her any sympathy. So I'm not an eye for an eye guy. I'm really not. But let's just make a little comparison here. So don't ask for too much sympathy here that it cancels out what's right. And it really is as simple as that. And I'm going to go back to Jake Tapper for a second. He had to, and I'm asking you, I'm saying it like a statement, but I'm asking you, he had to have known he was going to get a lot of flack for this, right? And he did it anyway. What's the motive there? I mean, is it just greed? Is it that he doesn't care? Is it that he's looking to change directions? What do you think is going on with that?
So it's about book sales. That's all it is. And really, he knows he's only going to sell this book in limited numbers to conservatives. Right. He's going to sell this. Now he's going to sell it in higher numbers to conservatives. Right. Because at the same time that he is revealing all of these secrets that all of us normal people already knew, he's also bashing the media as a whole. Right. So now it appeals to a different audience. He knows that if he sells enough copies of this book, he can walk away from CNN and it doesn't matter. He can go on the speaking circuit. He can do those $1 million at a college kind of thing and never have to worry about it. So I think it's all about book sales. I don't think he really cares about, his reputation within the media circles. And honestly, I think that he doesn't care about the hypocrisy either.
No, really. Clearly, right?
Clearly doesn't care. Call me a hypocrite, buy my book. That's probably where he's at in his life right now. And it is what it is. So he's not an ethical man, clearly. So for all of us to be expecting him to be concerned about public opinion or any of the rest of that stuff is a fool's errand, because he doesn't care. He didn't care about covering up the president. He didn't care. He doesn't care. So all he wants you to do is buy his book. And
and I'll even go so far as to give him even more diabolical credit and say that I don't watch him. I've never listened to him. I've only heard a few sound bites of his, most recently with Megyn Kelly. I find him thoroughly, completely unlikable, smug, arrogant, condescending, all of the things, flat out liar, obviously. nothing redeeming. So I will also credit him with, he's probably very smart and sees the writing on the wall for mainstream media. And he probably is, one of those guys that is just gonna, or has lit the match, tossed it, and walked away as everything explodes behind him. And, I don't think he's alone in that. I can't give you any for instances who else is doing that. But I would say he's a perfect example of people who, see that the ship is sinking and they're bailing and they're going to go in a totally different direction, right?
No, he's Don Lemon. I mean, it's, Lemon kind of burned all the bridges on his way out the door. Mm-hmm. And he thought that he was going to make it as a podcaster. Hey, let me tell you something, folks. Very few people are making money off a podcast, unless your name is Joe Rogan or Theo Vaughn. That's about it. But, I think you're right. I think that's really a great reach on this, is that CNN itself, let alone the entire left-leaning media, CNN's dying. And whenever it is the Tapper's, contract with them is up, they probably they may not even be able to afford to pay him what he's being paid now. So might as well use the platform while he can, sell as many books as he can while he's there, and then, prepare himself to move on to something bigger and better in his eyes. And in the meantime, just not care what people think about him.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Lead's not really a thing anymore.
The dust is everywhere.
It's like it's coming through the floor.
Lead, a true story featuring Merritt Weaver, Alessandro Nivola, Cynthia Nixon, and me, Cooper Burkett. Lead, how this story ends is up to us. Now available on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. We have the power to write the final chapter. Go to endleadpoisoning.org to let your voice be heard.
Yeah. I think that's the case. And, I hope he crashes and burns the same way Don Lemon has. I really do. I just hate to see awful people succeed. I really do. And I know it happens all the darn time. They just reinvent themselves publicly, and they're still the same slimy snake underneath the nice shiny suit. But we'll see. We'll see what he does.
Yeah. Let's go back to the president real quick, President Biden. So, a couple more things about this diagnosis. One, don't be surprised, or don't ignore the idea that this is potentially a distraction, like you said earlier, for something completely different, right? This could be the shiny object over here while something else is going on over here by the DNC completely, right? This could be an absolute distraction. It could be a distraction to, take attention away from good things that President Trump is doing. It could be a distraction to take away attention from anything else really that they wanted to. So it could be that. And then, I think the other thing is, they really believe that the sympathy from this will garner okay, we're just going to wash away the sins, right? Just let everything pass. And I think that they honestly believe that if President Biden gets a pass on everything, then everybody associated with him will also get a pass. So they don't do an investigation out of sympathy on, let's just say, the auto pen, right? Oh, clearly President Biden, he was incapable. We can't do, he gave people the code, whatever it was. We can't, we're not going to investigate him. He's dying of cancer. And then the 72,000 instances of using the auto pen suddenly go away. Listen, nobody has to convict, even prosecute President Biden to hold people accountable, like you said, for those actions. So they are already campaigning to be like, just let it all go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let it go. And we'll let him go. Truthfully.
He can go. I mean, we're actually as fine as we can be with that. Like, life has taken care of him in the way that
I'm as a bitch.
I mean, his very existence, the very human that he was throughout his lifetime, which is a really garbage human. And I can cite plenty of instances going back to his wife and son, the car accident, and what he did to that poor man that was responsible for the accident. What he did to that man is unbelievable. I'm going to leave it at that. You can go research it yourself, guys. But none of it is excusable. So there needs to be a kind of just because he's basically going to get off the hook, as we know he is. We all know this. Like nothing's going to happen to Joe Biden. They are going to let him live out his days with ice cream on the beach, every day, all day long. That's what he's going to be doing. It is what it is. But everybody else involved, the actual puppet masters, Jill, I would love to see Jill Biden in jail. That would make me very happy. I think she is an absolutely abhorrent human.
Even more so than we thought, I think.
Wow. Yeah. Absolutely. That is a great glimpse at what money, power, greed, what it does to a person. I tell you, I was thinking a lot about this. Like you always think about when you're just an average regular person, you think about what the other life is like. And I generally don't care, but you think about it in that philosophical way. You're like, geez, to have all of that, to be so free to do whatever it is that you want because you have unlimited money and access and all of these things. And I look at people like that and I'm like, you know what, you can have it. Like it's really gross what it does to people. So I'd rather be a not have than a have if that's what it does to you. And that's not, for everybody. You look at the Trump family, these are, about as fine, upstanding people as you can get. They're all productive, contributing, humans in society, and they have more money than they could possibly know what to do with. So it's a character thing.
You know who just lost out on a whole bunch of money?
Who?
The former president and CEO of CBS News.
Yeah, she did. Yes. Yeah. I mean,
so this is Wendy McMahon is her name. And this goes back, folks, to the Kamala Harris 60 Minutes interview, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is the origin, right?
Right. So it goes back to that, which we all know was doctored, right? It was re-edited. She was given opportunities to re-answer questions, and President Trump sued the network for, what is it? $20 billion,
$20 billion. Yep.
And so Paramount, who owns CBS, has basically said, we're not fighting this because we know even the optics are bad. So they're not going to fight it. Last week it went into arbitration. So or into mediation. So they're going to settle out of court on this thing, which I know technically is not an admission of guilt. I get that. Right. However, it doesn't look good. So anyway, Miss Wendy McMahon, president and CEO of CBS News, said, we are not doing this. I don't support this. If you guys do this, if you do this, I'm resigning. And Paramount looked at her and said, go ahead.
Yeah. Exactly.
And she really was kind of, they called her bluff. So she resigned. I don't know how much she was making. I'm assuming the president and CEO of CBS News makes a decent amount of money.
Yeah, she was probably getting a
and so this is also, I forgot about this until I was looking, doing some research. They also had Bill Owens, who's the executive producer of 60 Minutes, resigned in April. So, this is a lot of upheaval for really what is CBS News' anchor show of 60 Minutes. So you've had the executive producer and now the president and CEO, both based on the same lawsuit from President Trump, because Bill Owens said the same thing. He said, listen, I Paramount is going to come down. They basically gave him some guidance and said, listen, we're going to run this a lot cleaner than we have. It's going to be less editorial and more news. And Owens, who had been there for a long time, was like, that's not how I run things. And they said, we don't care. That's how we're running things. Right. And he did the same thing. He said, I'm leaving. And he bailed. So that's a bit of a mess. So that's now 2 lawsuits, right? That President Trump against the media is coming out on top. Do you see a massive change in mainstream media, at least maybe from the legacy networks?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely a sign of the shift, that's happening. They're seeing the writing. Some of them are, well, let me rephrase that. They're all seeing the writing on the wall. It's whether or not they're going kicking and screaming or leading the charge, basically, to make the change so that they can pretend that they were, we weren't involved with any of that. We're not those guys. And those are the smart ones. Those will be the smart ones, because if you get ahead of this, if you're a Jake Tapper and you are getting ahead of this in whatever way you choose, you probably will end up okay. But the structure and the behaviors of legacy media or alphabet media, as I prefer to call them. This is the shift. It's beginning, and it could not have come at a better time. They can't get away with it anymore, and of course, but again, I always bring it back around to what's going on in the minds of the left. And of course, they are going to be kicking and screaming and probably protesting things because that's what they do, right? That this is some kind of censorship, and this is, they're going to call it all of those things. And I don't care what they call it. Call it whatever you want. You paint that picture however it makes you feel better in your little corner. The fact is this is what, I've been harping on, and so many of us have been harping on for so long, that we want accountability in media. And you may have been the one. I'm going to give you credit with this, because I feel like it was a Clayism way back once upon a time when we talked about this, that, it's not going to be by legislation. You really don't want government involved in media, like that. I mean, we saw what happened. They changed the narrative of the entire country for an election cycle through social media. So we knew we wouldn't want to see that happen, the government stepping in and making them do things or not do things. What we wanted to see, or what we needed to see, was things like massive lawsuits, that were going to basically cut them off at the knees, where they couldn't fight that. And, it happens to be President Trump that led the charge on the lawsuits. And I'm thrilled for that. Listen, if he didn't have a leg to stand on, none of this would be happening. So, nobody should be fooled, and the proof of that is you could talk about the Supreme Court not always siding with him, so nobody can really argue any of these things, that it's because he's the president, he's abusing his power, and, this is a government overreach, or, whatever they're going to try and throw at this. Sure. No, this is the accountability that we've been demanding finally starting to happen. And yeah, they got a wild ride ahead of them.
Listen, you and I have said this a number of times. We are not reporters, right?
Nope.
This is all editorial, all of it, right?
Yep.
We take a topic, we present some facts associated with the topic. You and I provide our opinions on the topic, right? Mm-hmm. And all it is to give people something to think about, right? Maybe a discussion point. That's what we're doing. We are not reporting the news.
Nope.
The problem is that the news sources, and this is a prime case, right? Mm-hmm. 60 Minutes, this interview, Vice President Harris running for president, was presented as news, as truthful, as an interview, unedited, unaltered, blah, 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 blah. And then it turned out not to be true.
Right.
And the news itself, from legacy media, from the streaming sources, whatever, right, has become so editorialized, so opinionized. You don't know what is the news and what isn't the news, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why independent journalism is back on the rise, is because people don't trust mainstream media. And this is an example of that. So yes, people are voting with their feet. We know that, mainstream media is not being paid attention to like it had in the past. Mm-hmm. Ratings are in a dumpster right now. And it's because of their conduct. So, this is the way that changes their conduct, and it changes how they report, as the fourth, arm of the government, then so be it. I think this is the change that's required. We do all just have to be careful that doesn't swing in the opposite direction.
Right.
We don't want the government involved in media. This is why PBS and NPR, like that stuff's going away, mm-hmm. because the government was too involved in the messaging over those networks, right? Yeah. So we don't want that. So we've got to make sure that the pendulum doesn't go swing in the other direction. We've got to make sure that we don't have, the old Soviet days where they controlled the media kind of stuff. We don't need that. We just want better, cleaner, more honest reporting. And folks, listen, Fox News is biased too. Okay.
Of course. Absolutely.
They, I watch Gutfeld. He makes me laugh. Actually, his guests make me laugh more than he does. I don't like Jesse Waters. Hannity I can only take him in small doses for the exact same reason, because it is biased news. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm cautious calling that news. So I'm glad these things are happening. CBS just is bearing the brunt of it right now. Right. I do give Miss McMahon a little bit of credit for a little bit of courage to say, listen, if you do this, I'm leaving. Yeah. Paramount said. So good for her for standing up for her principles, as misguided as they may be. But good on her.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you think, the next phase of that is how do you think the media, particularly obviously legacy media, mainstream media, do you think this is going to change how they interact with politicians, with presidential candidates? Like, do you think, was this enough of a slap on the hands that they're not going to do this stuff anymore, this manipulation, no matter what? Or is it all depend on...
They'll be more careful about it for sure. They will definitely do that. But I think as a whole, I think you will see a shift. I think you will see a different, I don't know exactly how, but I think you'll see a difference. It's not going to be Walter Cronkite, I can tell you. But it's you're going to see a different type of reporting, I think, in the next presidential election cycle. In 3 years when it kicks off, you will see a very different style of media coverage, and that will evolve over time. But yes, this is a slap heard around the world, and then they're going to all take it seriously because they can't afford $20 billion.
Right? No, not these days for sure. Maybe once upon a time, but not these days.
Not anymore. Yeah.
I think there's probably one thing. I would like to believe that there's one thing that whether you're on the left or the right, that I think we can all agree that we just really want unbiased news.
Yeah.
Like, just give me what the facts are. Like, it makes me want to swear. It makes me so angry. Like, all I actually want is the facts. Don't tell me how to feel, or don't try and, sway how I feel about it. Tell me what the facts are. Let me process that and think about what that means to me and how I feel about it without you telling me how to feel about it, or implying how I should feel about it. And that's it. Like, I feel like, please, if the one person on the left is watching this, tell me you agree with me that all you want is the truth.
Yes.
I don't want his side or her side. I don't give a crap about anybody's side of things. I want the actual facts and truth, period. Am I crazy, Clay?
No, but I will say this. Opinion pieces are fine. I have no problem with that.
Sure.
As long as it's not presented as fact, right? There used to be the whole, nobody reads a newspaper anymore, right? The whole editorial page, right? I think now what you get online and when you're looking at it on your phone, it's probably not the clearest thing in the world, but there are usually like this little red square that says opinion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That most people don't pay attention to, or after they see it, they don't, they disregard it.
Right.
But when it comes to network news reporting, there is no flash across the bottom of the screen that says editorial or opinion or anything like that. You just have reporters, and to me, for decades, George Stephanopoulos has been the worst of the worst when it comes to this. But that's what you get opinion versus news, and that you're right. That's not what we want. We just want the facts. We're grown-ups. We'll figure it out, and we don't have to be spoon-fed opinion. So not on the news.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to watch, Gutfeld is a great example. Any show like that, or The Five, or any of those, they're, like you said, they're giving opinions on news stories.
Yep.
Excuse me. That's fine. That's great. Label it as such, right?
Yep. What do we got next?
I'm sorry, I'm trying not to choke to death.
Taking a drink.
Elsa's having a day here.
Right.
Oh, let's see. Let's move on to this guy. Russia. I don't know why I have to say it like that every time. I can't help it.
It's okay. You're a Brady Bunch kid. I get it.
I am. Yeah. I'm the Brady Bunch era. I just have to.
You're the bottom window. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Russia-Ukraine peace talks are underway, or were underway. Russia's open to ceasefire based on current battle lines. Ukraine isn't agreeing unless territory is returned. This is kind of more your area. Give me your thoughts and opinions on that.
So, President Trump has said from the get-go, and even during his campaign, that he wants this war to end because he wants killing to end, right? And truthfully, he doesn't believe in investing any money in this, and being who he is, right?
Yeah.
U.S. money, NATO money, nobody should be investing in this because it's a waste. And oh, by the way, it's a waste of human lives, and he just wants it to end. He's been very, very clear about that, which is also why he's not really taking sides.
Right.
He did spend 2 hours on the phone with President Putin, and said, and came off the phone and said, listen, he's sick of the killing too. He's sick and tired of the dying. He wants the war over with. So now what we're doing is stepping back to an extent and forcing the issue of Ukraine-Russia direct peace talks with no U.S. influence, interference, mediation, any of the rest of that stuff. Let them figure it out. Now, this is where kind of the rubber meets the road in this thing is, who's willing to give up what? Okay. And, Zelensky doesn't have a lot of room to maneuver on this. He really doesn't. He can say no, and he can demand to have Ukraine restored to what it was. And the Russians don't have to give it to him. He is, with us backing out especially, and really the position we've taken since President Trump got into office, is he doesn't have a lot of help. So, we were trying to get him to see that when he came to the Oval Office and made an ass out of himself, is that he doesn't have, that's what President Trump kept yelling at him, was you don't have the cards, right? You don't have the cards to make this deal. Let me make it for you, and let's get this thing over with. And so now we're backing out and really making them do it. Between the two nations. But Zelensky's got nothing to go on. He has no bargaining chip. Putin is tired because it's wasting resources and it's wasting money and it's destroying his army. And he's already leaned on, he's leaned on North Korea, which was a weird one. There's some influence with China, although, by the way, we talked about this last week. Right? There's the economic connection between the U.S. and China at this point with the tariff reduction. Right. You've got the U.S. renegotiating with OPEC, right, who provides a lot of the, a lot of economic influence into Russia, including oil, et cetera. So, there's a lot of push behind Russia to shut this thing down. And I think that President Trump is trying something new. He's trying something different, which is he's not trying to negotiate the deal. He's just trying to force the deal to be negotiated, which is a new and different position for him. But I think it's pretty smart, actually.
For as little as I know of that world, it sounds smart. You know what I mean? Because you're talking about, let's face it, Putin is, he's a superpower. You do have to be careful. You do have to be strategic in how you deal with him, with them, with Russia, and with China, of course. And I think President Trump has such a instinctive understanding of how to deal with very specific people. He's not treating him the same way he is treating the South African president today. That was a very different. I know that's not on our list, but it just happened. Oh, this is the time stamper, right? You tell him, Clay. Tell him.
Yeah, it is currently Wednesday at 5, approximately 15 p.m. on the East Coast. So yeah, you and I thought exactly the same thing. We forgot to do the timestamp, but you're right. The South African president. Was in the Oval Office today, and President Trump handled him like a child. He literally rolled the TV in, turned the lights down, and said, "This is you, right? This is the genocide I'm talking about that you're denying is going on, right?" He totally different. He would never do that to Putin. He didn't want to do that to Zelensky. Zelensky forced him to because he acted like an idiot, right? So, yeah, you're right. I think it's smart. I think it's very intuitive for him, but it is not his norm. He's the action guy. He wants to be in the middle of everything. And this time he's backing away, which again, I think is out of character, but incredibly smart.
Yeah. Unlike potentially, again, I was not an insider. I am not an insider. I only know what I feel that I observe. I think this is, again, a wildly different presidency than was the last time. Oh, yeah. I think he has, of course, the right people around him. And I think he is listening to input from, people who would have these insights and answers of how to deal with very specific people. And of course, I think he knows generally. But again, I think this is a very cooperative move on his part in getting a really clear understanding of what the next move should be. And I would imagine they are sitting in those rooms strategizing, okay, if we do it like this, if we if we put the hammer down and say, we're getting involved in this, let's play out what's going to happen. And I think that's what, of course, you should be doing. But that's what I imagine happening. And they probably played out every scenario here. And this is the one that makes the most sense. So, I hope that they do the right things. Zelensky, both of them, they're wild cards. And obviously Trump knows that, and he knows that he can't really predict what they're going to do, or that they're going to do what they're saying that they're going to do. So I think that's another part of that, right? That, I'm going to take this very, very conscious step back for us, the United States, and say, this is your problem. You better handle it. Brilliant.
Yeah. And he's running it. We collectively, the world, are running out of options on ways to end this, other than a complete, either a NATO step in as peacekeepers and, put the wedge in between, which I don't advocate for. But there's that, or there's total victory one way or the other. There's not a lot of options left, and even fewer to end this peacefully. So, before NATO gets involved, or the UN, NATO more likely, I think this is a different approach, and I like it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about something we're not going to like talking about.
All right. Listen, this is shameful for the Navy. So Admiral Robert Burke is his name. He is a 4-star retired. He was actually the vice CNO of the Navy. If you don't know what that means, the CNO is the Chief of Naval Operations, which is equivalent to the Chief of Staff. He is the Chief of Staff of the Navy, right? They just use a different term because they're sailors, right? So Chief of Naval Operations is the Chief of Staff. He is the highest ranking naval officer. The vice is his number 2. So he was the second highest ranking, second most powerful Navy officer before any of this happened. He was also in charge of all of their personnel at one point in time. I don't know what the sequencing of that was, but he was in charge of all of the personnel across the Navy. So he is about to be the highest ranking, or highest ranking military prisoner, the highest ranking individual to go to jail, because he is facing 30 years in prison for bribery.
Yeah. Yeah. What he did specifically, he took a $500,000 a year job in exchange for steering defense contracts towards a private firm. Kind of sounds like a no-no, huh?
Yeah, it's I won't say these don't happen, because there have been incidences that I know of where you do, I shouldn't say you do, but what happens is people, high-ranking officers who have the ability, have oversight over contracts for any number of things, construction, for training, for purchases, whatever it is, they kind of lean towards people they know. Generally that happens out of like, I'm doing a solid for my buddy, right? That's the intent of it. Not necessarily what Admiral Burke did, which is exchange it for $500,000 a year job. So this is an unnamed corporation, and he was kicking training contracts their direction in the hundreds of millions of dollars for this unnamed corporation in exchange for a $500,000 a year job upon his retirement. And really, what he screwed up on the most was, when you do contracting, you're supposed to do open bid for almost everything, which means you put out a requirement that says, we need a company to do XYZ. Here's the stipulations that we're looking for. And it's an open bid. Any company can come to you and say, we can fulfill all of those, right? And it's a competition. You evaluate who submits a bid and who's best to fill the requirement. And then, through that evaluation, you say, okay, that's the company that we're going to go with, right? It's open bid. You can, in certain cases, when you're looking for speed, right, need it filled right away is one reason. And then another reason is, we know there's only one company that can fulfill this requirement. So they do what they call sole source. We know who's going to fill the contract. We know that they're the only ones that are capable, or we know that they're the only ones that can do it in the amount of time we need it done, etc. You can justify sole source contracting, which is what he did. Sole sourced it to this unnamed company to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and then found out it was in exchange for this $500,000 a year job when he retired.
And so was that the red flag? Like, how did he actually get caught?
It was the sole sourcing the sole sourcing did it. That's really what did him in. I guess, they were being careful about this. This all happened in a window of 2020 to 2022. But I guess they held a meeting, and he basically told them, stay away from me, like physically, like, let's not, or maybe they told him the same thing, like, hey, let's, keep at a distance. We'll make this as innocent looking as possible. And then they had a personal meeting somewhere in 2021 where they actually met. And I think that was kind of one of the indicators. And then it all came apart after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
30 years in jail. He's going to die in jail if he serves a whole sentence, because he's 60. I think he's 64 years old at this point. So even if he serves half of it, he's still going to be 79.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not good.
Not good. Speaking of not good Navy incidents, not that it's funny. I don't know why I just laughed. That was so wrong. It was one of those, I don't know what that was.
It's uncomfortable. It's a Kamala laugh.
That's exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clay. Yes, that's exactly what it was. That was the Kamala laugh that just snuck right out there. Yeah, this is actually crazy and awful. And we do have a little clip of the video. So let's watch that for a moment. You can hear the people in the background. They think it's like disbelief. Yeah, at first glance, and I'm sure, and meaning for the people like recording this and watching this, there's no way they could have known how really catastrophic that was. For I think what was it? Two people died.
Two cadets.
Two cadets.
Yeah.
Wow, and I think like 23 people injured in that. So,
what they couldn't see from that bridge, really, from that vantage point they were filming, was that they were standing along those rolled sails. So as they went up the mast, right, and you've got the levels of sails up there,
right.
And I don't know the naval term. I don't know what the term is for the cross, where the sail comes down. They were standing on those when they hit the bridge. And you can tell if you look, the attention obviously is drawn to the masts and it impacting the bridge, but that ship is going backwards.
Oh, okay.
So there was it was not meant to go that way, right? And they had a mechanical failure. My assumption, since the sails were rolled up, it had a mechanical failure in the engine, and then flowed backwards, probably with the flow of the river, and that's why it hit the bridge.
Okay, well, so that it really does explain everything. I mean, it explains a lot because like you said, watching it, you're like, how could they not see the bridges there? Like, what are they doing? Were they drunk? What's going on? That makes perfect sense. Just absolutely awful. Very, very sad, very tragic.
Well, and to make it worse, so it's the I'm going to butcher this.
I can't either. You're going to try it?
The ARM Huatamak, I think, is what
sounded good to me.
I think that's as close as it's going to get. So it is a training ship for their naval cadets. I don't think we operate anything old like that anymore. I know we did for a while. I know we have a sailing team at the Naval Academy, and we do have some older ships, but I don't think we operate anything like that. I know we still have some in the inventory, the Constitution, the Constellation, which are both museum ships. But anyway, they were here on a goodwill mission, had been here for a couple of weeks. And then they were actually, I'm fairly confident that was their departure to go back to Mexico. So they were on their way home when that happened. But the worst part of this is in the aftermath. Did you see Chuck Schumer and how stupid he was with this?
This guy, he is something else. Yeah, go ahead. Tell him what he.
So he blamed, because the first thing you do in a case like this is blame somebody.
Right.
So he blamed DHS and Doge for cutting the Coast Guard. And if there was more Coast Guard, they hadn't cut the Coast Guard and there was more Coast Guard, they would have been able to prevent this from happening with tugboats and all these other things. Now, Coasties and DHS have come out and said that is 100% false.
Yeah, you got a good little slap down for that nonsense.
Yeah, but really, like that's your immediate reaction is to blame for something like this, not knowing any of the details. Right. Not knowing anything, any reason why it happened, anything else. He immediately went after the administration because he's just a piece of garbage as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's emblematic of the Democrat Party. And we'll kind of go back to that a little bit. It does actually. Yeah. You know what? Let's go right to that since I just brought it up. Let's go to Bernie, if you don't mind. Bernie's so funny. But this is just like the overarching theme of the Democrat Party, that they cannot stop sticking their foot in their mouths, so to speak. They can't not keep screwing up and just destroying their party, like completely demolishing it. And Bernie had some, I don't know, is it surprising? I don't know for Bernie to say
a little bit. It's a little bit of sour grapes.
Yeah. He's such a crotchety old man anyhow. So, your first glance is like, oh, it's just a crotchety old Bernie statement. There it is. The Democratic Party is a threat to democracy. The last fair election was in 2008. Just throwing in the word.
Yeah, so he's out on his, fight the oligarchy
Oligarchs, yeah.
tour with AOC, right? Where they're traipsing around in his multi-million-dollar jet, fighting the oligarchy. And he stopped in on a I can't remember the name of it, but he stopped in on a podcast, which is I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it's two younger guys who are Democrats.
Yeah.
And so they started talking to Bernie about, obviously his entire intent of being there was to fight the oligarchy tour, right? That's what all of this was for. And they brought it up to him and they said, hey, we kind of feel like we're getting shafted. They're both Democrats, admittedly, and they said we feel like, the last election with no primaries being run, and then the elections before that, it seems like our candidates are being picked for us. Bernie Sanders, came in, or not Bernie Sanders, but Joe Biden came in very late in the previous election, so that was kind of taken out of everybody's hands, right? And then and so on and so forth, and the one before that was Hillary over Bernie, right? For the Democratic Party, and so they said it. They said to him, like, we feel like they actually asked him, is the Democratic Party they seem like they're the ones that are a threat to democracy? And he said, well, I can't argue with you. And he brought up, I think he brought up the 2008 with him and Hillary. And they fixed primaries was really what it was.
Right.
Every primary's been fixed since at least 2008. And he said, yeah, we're the Democratic Party is a threat to democracy. And that's why I'm happily an independent.
Yeah. And he called him out for losing touch with the people. So, listen, I'm never going to be a fan of Bernie's other than to find enjoyment and out of, his Muppet caricature of a person. He's just one of the old men on the Muppets, up in the balcony, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's him all day long. So he's great for entertainment value. But him and his best gal, AOC, who, hang on a second, who is considered the top pick there. She's like their number one gal right now, which, again, tells you everything you need to know about the state of this party. Everything you need to know is right there.
And to your first point about they're in a lot of turmoil, number one, this is the first time, truthfully, that since Bernie put the I on the back, he took off the D and replaced it with an I. This is the first time I've actually seen him sound like an independent.
Yes.
Truly, right? But there's a lot of turmoil in the Democratic Party right now at party level because they're kicking David Hogue out already.
Yes. Yep.
Which he's already talking about turning around and suing them, right? And
of course he is.
Yeah, you've got such a mess in there. So you're right. They keep shooting themselves in the foot. The whole thing with President Biden with the cancer, you've got Tapper's book, you've got the her recordings, they want Biden out of the way because he makes it worse every time he speaks. Right. There's a lot of crap going on. And now you've got Bernie, who is part of the system, right? He is long established part of the system saying, yeah, they suck pretty bad. It's not a good look at all.
No. And, to be honest with you, and we've kind of touched on this many times in the past, that, I don't want them to do anything different. I want them to keep doing exactly what they're doing. Don't change a thing. I feel like there's a song there, an 80s song. I won't do it to you. I won't start singing it. But yeah, don't change. Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. This is
one exception
for us.
One exception. I want them to run their cities better.
Yes.
I want, right? And New Orleans is prime example, right?
Yeah.
So we had New Orleans New Year's, we had the truck terrorism attack, right? Where we had, as bad as it was, what got the most amount of press was the FBI agent with the nose piercing. If you remember that. And now we've got a 10 prisoners escaped from a New Orleans. It's the Orleans Parish prison. So they escaped. It was an inside job. You and I were talking right before we started recording about, so it's an inside job. We know that one person was arrested. There were 2 more people arrested, not inmates, not escapees, but 2 more people contributing to the escape. But 10 escaped. We've recovered 5. There's still 5 out there. Have you seen the pictures?
Yeah, we actually have the video of
awesome.
Here's a video of them just making the run for it. But yeah, you're referencing the pictures of the actual cells with the too easy. There's like so crazy.
Yeah, folks, if you haven't seen it, they removed the entire toilet apparatus, moved it, broke a hole in the wall. This is like Alcatraz escape kind of stuff, right? Broke a hole in the wall, took the time to write some graffiti all around the hole, as they were doing this. And then when the time came, they when they had, it seems like a lot of access, probably cell doors were open.
Right.
And so they moved the toilet out of the way and they all made a break for it.
Yeah, it's like some alternate universe Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yeah.
With zero redemption.
Right.
Not an ounce of redemption going on.
Yeah. And so very much like New Year's, what is getting even more attention, I don't know if you saw this, is the press conference. So Stephanie Minto Gibson is her name. She stepped up there and she was the spokesperson for the police department. And she stood up there in her police uniform with these whacked out green, large frame, crazy glasses. And listen, she might be the most competent spokesperson in the world. She looked like an idiot.
Right.
Which again, when you've got a crisis situation that says, we've had a prison escape with violent criminals, she's not instilling a lot of confidence that they have the best people working at the police department.
Right. Yeah. Not the face of competence right there.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. It's wild. And, I agree with you. Of course, if there's anything that they could do that would be of any use, it would be to do better in your cities, but that's counterintuitive to their goals. That's never going to happen. And, anyone who's been alive for more than a minute and who's been really paying attention knows that is never the agenda for inner city leadership, right? They need these people, their citizens or constituents, to be dependent, to be angry. That kind of sums it up, right?
I will say this, good for the people of New Orleans, because I heard 2 stories about the 5 that they found. One of them was that the most violent of the 10 was found first. He was the first one picked up, and somebody spotted him hiding under a truck at a gas station and called the police. And the police came and they picked him up. Good. The second one was a guy asleep on a bench at a bus stop. And some New Orleans citizen walked over, said, wait a minute. And he the guy's dead asleep. And he pulls out his phone and he looked at the pictures of the escapees and he goes, yep. And he called the police. And the police walked over and, hey, buddy, you're going back to jail. Woke him up off the party. So good for the people in New Orleans. And for those of you, listen, it's been a few days now. So they're if they have any brains whatsoever, they are hundreds of miles away from so everybody be on the lookout. But good for the people in New Orleans. If you see something, say something, please report what you know. They will figure this out. But it sounds like they've got 3 co-conspirators that have helped out with this. And hopefully we'll get those 5 back into custody soon before they do anything even dumber.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, boy. I think this, these people turning them in and everything, I think it's a good sign or a good example of the fatigue that we all feel. Like somebody, I saw a couple people posted, I think our buzzword right now is going to be Democrat fatigue. And I think that is right. And I think that is really apropos. I feel like that is where we're at. We are at leftist fatigue. We're at liberal fatigue. We're at Democrat fatigue. We're at stupidity fatigue. We're done with all of it, and that doesn't mean, and there's somebody that's going to come in and say, well, you're losing, you need to be compassionate and blah, blah. We already went over that before. We've already talked about compassion. You can be compassionate for people in need and people struggling and people who have difficult circumstances. That doesn't excuse bad behavior. It just simply doesn't. Because if you've ever, people always say, the people on the left will always say things like, well, you don't understand, they had a difficult childhood and, they need rehabilitation more than they need jail, and all of these nonsensical things. If you have existed on earth, you've had a television, you've had people in your life other than the people who've done you wrong, you have seen examples of good behavior, right? So there are no excuses. And I can't buy it. I can't buy into it.
Yeah. And that word fatigue is a good word. And I think, we've got this administration in place that is no longer tolerating, they're fatigued too. And they're speaking for all of us because they got elected to do. So they're no longer tolerating, the crap from the liberal left. And, Marco Rubio did it. RFK Jr. did it, both of them this week, basically in testimony. We're getting grilled or getting, comments made towards them, and they snapped back. Which was great. Rubio, basically he told the congressman, because the congressman told him at the end of his allowed remarks, said, and I have to tell you in person that I regret, voting for you for Secretary of State. And he goes, and I, turn over my time, or whatever he said. Yeah. And so Rubio asked if he could respond, and the chairman said, go ahead. And he goes, if you're regretting your vote for me, that means I'm doing a good job. And then he went into his explanation for everything that was going on. And then RFK, testifying this week, basically looked at a lady that was I think she's Department of Health. And he said, you've been here for 30 something years. You've contributed to the demise. You've contributed to the sickness of this nation, blah, 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 blah. And he went after her. Yeah. And so I think that is very emblematic. It's very representative of how so many people in this country feel right now. Yes. And it's good to see that our elected and appointed officials who represent us are holding the government accountable for their role in where we sit right now. So that's what people voted for. And I think they're getting what they paid for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel that way very much right now. And that they're doing it so eloquently too. Yeah. Eloquent and firm and straight to the point and fact loaded, which has been, so enjoyable to watch. No sputtering or stumbling over their words. They are so clear and concise, and it's such a joy to watch. I didn't watch, I caught little bits of RFK's Junior's. I did watch Rubio's, and again, that man is making me so proud. He's such a beast. He's an absolute beast. And that's guy,
you don't want to debate with that guy. Like, no, that you really don't. You're gonna walk yourself into a lot of trouble if you get into a verbal debate with that guy.
Yeah, he is a verbal assassin.
Very intelligent, super quick-witted, and he is not afraid. He will bring it. So it's pretty awesome. We're starting to see again. Folks, it's 120 days. Like, we are 120 days in, maybe a little bit more, but that's right where we're at. And this is what we're seeing. We still have 3 2/3 years of this. So,
wild.
It's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, it is. Oh my goodness gracious. We did it again. We had 7, 8 topics. I think we kind of threw in a little bit of extra.
Sure.
But there's so much to cover, and we did it, and all great topics too. Anything you want to close them out with?
Nope.
Nope. All right, we're good.
Listen, it's always my same thing, right? When in doubt, keep moving, keep shooting.
That's right. I love it. All right. We love spending time with you guys on Thursday nights. We appreciate you and look forward to hearing from you in the comment sections. Don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, all of the things. We appreciate it greatly. And we will see you guys next week. Take care.
Warrior, leader, author, patriot. From ranger school to the battlefield, from the front lines of combat to the front lines of culture, retired Lieutenant Colonel Clay Novak isn't done fighting for truth. Catch him on the Elsa Kurt Show and read his no-holds-barred blog at claynovakauthor.com. Keep moving, keep shooting.
If you've ever looked around and thought, this isn't normal and it sure isn't biblical, you're not alone. And guess what? You're not crazy, you're discerning. That's why I wrote Truth Bombs and Grace Grenades, a bold, unapologetic book for believers who are done being silent while the world screams lies. From gender confusion to political idolatry, from woke theology to spiritual apathy, we're hitting it all straight on, straight up, and backed by scripture. This isn't a rage-fueled rant, it's a rally cry, a wake-up call to stop apologizing and start boldly living out the gospel. Whether you're a new believer or a disillusioned disciple trying to find your footing again, this book is for you. It's packed with truth bombs, grace-filled strategies, and practical tools to help you speak truth with love, raise warriors, not warriors, dismantle lies with biblical clarity, and rebuild with grit, grace, and gospel power. The culture doesn't need more compromise. It needs courageous Christians. So if you're ready to push back against the chaos with bold faith and real truth, grab your copy of Truth Bombs and Grace Grenades on May 6, 2025. Let's shake things up with truth and grace.